The science proves that many of us, I would argue almost all of us, can truly heal. And it's just a matter of, I think, getting people's minds wrapped around what that means when you get those signs of anxiety, that you already have the antidote. The antidote being personal power of, oh, I know how to notice and acknowledge and hold space for this weird, yucky experience, and then I know what to do next. So she started writing these characters, and she started writing these family dynamics and these interactions and creating this whole world and writing. And what we ended up doing, so she came in to see me for therapy, and what we ended up doing is we were doing therapy with the characters in the story. So it created this level of removal for her where I'm not like big sister, I'm not broken and getting fixed by a doctor. I'm going to see this lady who thinks my story is cool. One of the scenes that she wrote about is that the mom was mean and terrible and the little protagonist wanted to kill the mom. And so we talked about those feelings that were coming up and what does that look like and how anger can express itself and what does she do? And that was the tool that I used, and she created it and she picked it.
I loved talking to you last time because I am an anxious person. So I, of course, on a personal level, just really resonate with everything that you say and all of the ways that you talk about the body and recognizing our signals, which is what I think we covered a lot of that last time in your book.
Yeah.
There's the book, everybody, just in case.
Yay.
Panic Proof, the new holistic solution to end your anxiety forever, which who doesn't want to end their anxiety forever, right?
Yeah.
I
Can I tell you
do.
something about that?
Yes.
So our culture ending anxiety is so antithetical to our culture that Amazon is like, you couldn't possibly end anxiety. And so they won't let us do ads for the book.
With that, because of the title Forever and says that?
Because it says end anxiety forever. They're like, no way that this could possibly be true, which is such a good reminder of why I'm on this mission, is to prove that wrong.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that, because one of the questions that I don't think we really talked about last time was how can we collectively change the narrative around anxiety, and that it's whether it's dismissed, labeled, said that it's something in your brain. Like I was one of those kids that grew up and people telling me that I had a chemical imbalance and I had to take this, what my parents used to call it, my happy pill, like so much awful language, and made me think I was, of course, the problem and that it was my brain and all this stuff. So can you tell me what you think of that and how we can
first of all,
that?
I honor you. It's absolutely a testimony to who you really are to have gone through that kind of messaging and ended up where you are right now in this conversation. Like, what a triumph to be able to jump over a chasm that is set up for you to fall in, right?
And I fell in a few times.
Yeah.
That's not, I think falling in is what made me go, oh, wait a minute.
Oh, same. I very much resonate with that. I was told anxiety is, you're broken. Sorry, this is just part of the human condition. Here's a happy pill. I took Lexapro for a lot of my young adult life, ended up back on it later in life, until actually looking at what the research says. So I feel like the answer to your question is we're already doing this in many ways. I think had this book come out a decade ago, it would have been a little too early. It would have been before its time, which is really, I could have used it then.
Nobody's ready even barely now. Like we're just, I think, changing now to be able to be ready for it.
I agree. And the research is there, which is wonderful, because in so many areas of medicine is the researchers, they create a null hypothesis. They're like, this isn't going to work. Why? There's no point. So they won't even study some things. But we have had research that have studied the incredible capabilities of the mind and body in changing, in healing. So the research is looking at it, and the science proves that many of us, I would argue almost all of us, can truly heal. And it's just a matter of, I think, getting people's minds wrapped around what that means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that you'll never feel anxious again. It doesn't mean you'll never be activated again. But what it does mean is that when you get those signs of anxiety, that you already have the antidote. The antidote being personal power of, oh, I know how to notice and acknowledge and hold space for this weird, yucky experience. And then I know what to do next. And I think that as people have more successes with that, that the conversation will become more and more mainstream.
Yeah. So, which brings us to, I think, this challenge of when we go to doctors
Mm.
or we go to professionals who maybe aren't totally trained in trauma or totally trained in understanding the mind body connection. Or, I
Mhm.
mean, you have to know about, it seems like from your book, reading about nutrition or no,
Mhm.
excuse me, understanding nutrition and neurobiology and physiology. Like there's so much that goes into this healing. And yet, and so many of us go to doctors and to people that we trust to care for us. We're told, you're to just, you need more sleep, take some vitamins, it's all in your head.
Mhm.
Or, like you said, that we're given pills that may be a temporary, like, I'm not going to deny anybody medicine, but if it's only a mask, how do we advocate for ourselves in a way that enables us to access this kind of healing?
I think there's a couple of ways to approach that. And one is to remember that nobody is all things for all people. And so when you have a good doctor and they're telling you you can't solve the problem of anxiety without medications, what they're really telling you is that I, as your doctor, can't help you to solve the problem of your anxiety without medications.
Okay.
And perhaps medications are part of your story right now. And so honoring that that's where they are, and then also honoring your human right to find somebody who perhaps can. And my favorite thing when I was in private practice is working as a team, is working with other experts. I can't do brain surgery, but I love to work with neurosurgeons. I'm not a pharmacist, but I love collaborating with pharmacists. And so,
Yeah.
even if your doctor isn't equipped to get you where you want to go, is I would encourage you to see if your doctor is open to collaboration. I, as a naturopathic doctor, have collaborated with a lot of different doctors with great success. It's just win-win. I learn from them and they learn from me. This is challenging though. As I say this, I
Yeah.
almost hear the replies in my mind of what a huge amount of pressure. I'm already anxious, and now you're asking me to liaison between my different doctors. And that's incredibly overwhelming, right? Just to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can feel really inaccessible. I feel like we need to find ways to bring community health to the forefront, and so that it can, I mean, I feel like we've done that with, just for an example, what I do in parent education.
Yeah.
We have brought so much in the last 10, 15 years. There's so much parent education that has been brought to community organizations, family service agencies that have now, and not saying that it wasn't there, but I think it was kind of dry and boring and very behavioral focused, that kind of thing back in the day. And now that we're bringing that to the forefront through community and through a nonprofit getting a grant, and then finally they're able to then support the community. So maybe that is how we need. I mean, obviously, healthcare is like a huge
Yeah.
thing in America anyway, which would be lovely if we could bring this to the forefront. What about kids? Like, can we just
Oh,
like shift maybe to then, if we can't do it, like we have to do it for ourselves, and we have to maybe go, what I'm hearing you say is seek out some different opinions when you can, to
yeah.
get someone that's going to look into those connections that we need. What about for kids who are maybe resistant to talk about their anxiety, even if the resources are there? They
Yeah.
may kind of shut down. It's not something that's maybe natural for them. How can we help teens and kids that are suffering?
I love the idea of getting the community involved as that grassroots process, because we're probably not going to at first change the insurance reimbursement systems. And, the American Medical
Have dreams.
Association, it was established in the early days to eradicate alternative medicines. And it's very successfully and systematically accomplished that through creating of insurance. And so um, there's a whole thing called the Flexner Report. There's just a whole lot of politics behind that, and it will take a lot of work to get that changed. There's a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of incentive to keep things the way that they are.
Yes.
Yeah. But how can we make a difference? And I think is starting with kids and bringing up generations of people that have different expectations. And you also brought up an important point of how to make it fun and accessible and to not feel like a slog. And so I have an example of a kid I was working with, and she had a lot of depression and anxiety that was, I think, related to she had a sibling in the household that was the identified patient, and there was a lot
Mm.
of attention and focus going to her sister.
And you
And
mean by that child happened to have illness or whatever and was focused on
yes.
as the
Yeah, so the parents' attention was really focused on big sister, and little sister was adapting in the best way that she knew how, but the home was feeling unstable. She probably had some attachment traumas herself, not having mom
yeah.
and dad available for her. Things felt really scary, and she would have these huge, big swings of emotion, very valid big swings of emotion, and she would just scream at the top of her lungs. And then her parents are like, "This is unacceptable. We can't have her just
Oh,
screaming." And so then they're trying to behaviorally modify this child out of the way of expressing her experience that she's having. So what is really, I think, a cool part of the story is that she started coping by writing stories herself. She came up with this
the mom or the daughter?
little daughter, little
Okay.
girl.
Okay.
So she started writing these characters, and she started writing these family dynamics and these interactions and creating this whole world and writing. And what we ended up doing, so she came in to see me for therapy. And what we ended up doing is we were doing therapy with the characters in the story. So it created this level of removal for her
Yeah.
where I'm not like big sister, I'm not broken and getting fixed by a doctor. I'm going to see this lady who thinks my story is cool, and we're working through things. Like, one of the scenes that she wrote about is that the mom was mean and terrible, and the little protagonist wanted to kill the mom. And so we talked about those feelings that were coming up and what does that look like and how anger can express itself and what does she do. And that was the tool that I used, and she created it and she picked it. And she did so much better, but we didn't do any traditional talk therapy or interventions with her. It was creative based
Right.
on her as a child and what she needed.
What I love that you said was how the one thing where she said she wanted to kill, which would
Mm.
be so unacceptable
Yeah.
to hear someone say, right? We would never be like, oh, you can't kill. Not that a therapist would do that, but a parent or somebody, even a teacher, we
Yeah.
don't say those kinds of things. You can't kill. You can say you're angry, but you can't say this. And to put it through, like you said, have that level of detachment and removal from the actual situation gave her that freedom. And of course, it wasn't that she wanted to kill, but to not
Right.
have language to really express how bad it felt, except for using very simple terms like, yeah, I want
Yes.
everyone to die or go away kind of thing.
Yes.
That's so empowering. I love that that gives it takes away that judgment that we have for kids for just expressing themselves in ways that we think are, oh, it's gonna, if we allow that, it will make the problem worse.
Yeah.
And
And
it's like,
oftentimes what we deny will amplify. And so if we were to try to correct her out of that feeling, then inarguably that feeling we see developmentally that kids will then turn that feeling inward. It's
mm,
not okay for me to be angry at somebody else or to be rageful about a situation. That's not okay. And
right,
so we see adults who are running around and they still have those same feelings, but they're directing them at the self. And so we have people who want to unalive themselves and are really, really depressed and really angry and really hopeless feeling. And so starting with our kids and allowing all vibes welcome. And of course, doing our due diligence with safety and impulsivity, of course, all of that, but
yeah,
also holding that space for all vibes welcome. And what does that look like? And then what do we do with that? I think that could be really exciting. So then as they're older and those bad vibes, if you will, come up, they've been there before and it's okay. And it's normal. It's part of what it
yeah.
is to be human.
What about teenagers? Because they can be a little more reticent, a little more unwilling, not maybe because they want to be, but because they don't also have the language, but they're not going to necessarily want to draw pictures, right? So,
Yeah.
not saying that I mean, my daughter and I used to pass, like, well, she was probably a little bit smaller, but even when she was like 12, we would pass notes underneath her bedroom door. If we got into some kind of conflict or she was having feelings, but she didn't know how to share them with me, we would just like, I would sit outside the door and she would pass a note and I would read it. And so that was for maybe like a little bit older. She was probably like 12 when we would do something like that. But what about like teenagers? And I know that I had a teenager during COVID.
Yeah.
And it really was challenging for, I think, a lot of kids that were in that, where they were going from either jumping from 8th to ninth grade, middle school to high school, or just in some, I mean, it was challenging for all kids. But if we just look at kids that were a little bit older or spent their first years of high school online, that kind of thing, what can we do for kids, for teenagers that are a little bit older, that maybe aren't gonna sit down and kind of play those games with us, but we know that we still wanna reach them.
I think that the world is the oyster when it comes with kids, and we can use trauma-informed interventions in a way that works with the kid. So, another example is I was working with a teenager, and he's 16, probably emotionally more like 14, and he's physically age 16. And he didn't wanna do art, he didn't wanna do music, but he loves video games.
Ah, okay.
And so what we did, so my colleague and I kind of split up and we kind of came at it in different ways. So one of my colleagues is another guy and they just played video games together and then they created that space, that third object to distract themselves while they talked.
Talks, okay.
And they had real conversation.
I love it.
And what I did with the kid is then we got together and we talked about how we could create video games and we started writing video games together. And we're
Mm.
like, okay, so this is the protagonist. And what is this protagonist's main suffering? In Dungeons and Dragons, they do this. By the way, have you heard of that? This is like coming back in popularity right now.
It Did it ever really leave? I mean, I feel like it's always been
True.
sort of underground and,
Yeah.
like, only certain kids that, I mean, because 'cause it's been around forever.
Yeah,
So,
my dad
but
played it in the 70s and my nephew plays it
you're
now. And
you're
so
making me feel old right now, Nicole. I just want you to know when you said
we
that.
are we are eternally youthful. We are eternally young. The world the date for old just gets kicked back as we get closer to it, right?
Yes, I was watching some, like, 20 or no, teenagers, and they were asked, "What year do you think is old? You know, does somebody become old?" And they were like 2000. I was like, "You guys, what are you
Oh,
talking about? Like, most people
no.
are only 25. Stop it."
I'm wounded.
I was think
That's
about
wounding.
it. Sorry, no, not to get off topic, but
I love this because everybody else listening was like, "Hey, just a second there." You think this is old. So with Dungeons
Sure.
and Dragons, you develop your character and then you give them weak points. Like they can't be all charismatic, they can't be all powerful. You give them growth points.
I
And
love this. I just have to say how much I love this
yeah,
analogy because I'm thinking like, how can we make kids be playful? And you're like, just and parents could do this too. That's what I was going to say that I
yes,
love is that you don't have to be a therapist to connect with your kid in this way. Like just taking interest in whatever their game. Maybe they like to skateboard, and I mean, not that they're going to take you to the skateboard park, but if you connect with them on those levels,
yeah,
that's where you're gonna get that inner. So
yes,
go ahead. So the Dungeon Jet,
yeah,
you have to give them these characters and weaknesses. So is it like developing how to deal then with
yeah. You can get
whatever they're
creative with that.
attributing?
So, as a trauma-informed person, as a trauma-informed parent, you're listening to this podcast, you guys are already 10 steps ahead, is that when your kid gets activated, when their reptilian brain kicks in and they go into fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, or fracture, that the most powerful interventions are gonna be the body-based ones. And so
Okay.
you can kinda slide those in. And you can incorporate that into the video games. Like, what if we threw cold ice at this guy and then the smoke comes off of him and his flames
Uh,
cool? Like, you could really have fun with it. And the skateboarding analogy, that example is really cool because then they like to go outside and do things. And maybe they won't take you to the skate park because that's not cool to have mom or dad going to the skate park, but you could take them to a skateboard convention. You could
mm,
take them to skateboard tournaments. You could take them places, and that will build that relationship because really the therapeutic relationship, the relationship will trump any intervention that we do. The relationship is key, and then having those conversations perhaps during that. And even if the kid doesn't want to have any sort of well, you're having anxiety, you don't want to just do Lexapro, let's do like deep breathing. Maybe they don't want to do that, but maybe one of the athletes that are skateboarders that they really like have a post on Instagram about breathing. So like I
yes.
feel like there's really creative ways to go about meeting your kid where they're at.
I love this. This is just even though that's something that maybe you thought of once or twice, write this stuff down because you forget in that moment of stress, you're not creative, right? We're not
Yeah.
being creative and thinking of ways. But if you just post those few little tips, like think about your kid and what they like and that kind of thing, and then kind of post those tips where you can access them when they're
Yeah.
starting to get heated, then this can really serve us. Because I know that I can sit and listen to a podcast or watch a video and be all fired up and
Yeah.
then walk away and kind of forget everything. So
Oh
if you're
yeah.
listening, this is just my note to take some notes. Like write if something hits you in the moment, write it down
Yeah. And
and
then
then
something really
stick it in the fridge.
practical that I like to do is collaborative crisis building plans. And so, like, most of the time when a teen is in crisis or a kid is in crisis, they're not going to have the prefrontal cortex to de escalate themselves. But
Right.
after the fact, sometimes we're lucky and they're willing to talk about it. And so we can create a beautiful handout that we stick in their room, on the mirror in their bathroom, on the refrigerator that's like, feeling stressed? Hey, remember number 1 on your list. Did you try that? Or,
Okay. So they have the plan
yeah,
in
I
front of
have,
them that they can self-access and
yeah, I have a teen that I work with, and she is diagnosed with pathological demand avoidance,
I'm so
PDA.
glad you brought that up because I was like, "Can I ask her about that? Is she gonna
Oh,
know?"
totally. Yeah.
Because I, as an autistic person, I didn't have language for this growing up, but it was like immediate shut down that I'm gonna need to do something. Or now I think I have language for it. Like I'm gonna be asked to do something, but what I didn't, I still kind of sometimes don't know. An email comes in and I'm like, oh my gosh. I can't get back to you right now. Like, what
Yeah.
is that? What do we do with that? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, there's interesting research, and I'm trying to it's Ralph Ankerman, I think. It's A
I
Ackerman or
don't know that.
Ankerman,
Okay, I don't know
and
that name.
I'll find it so I could give it to you so you can use it as a resource for your podcast here. And so he talks about how there may be in these individuals an autonomic nervous system reaction where when they get stressed, like someone's demanding something from them or they get an email, that it can stimulate their nervous system so that adrenaline is surging through their body and their heart beats faster and their blood pressure rises. And so we get these mind body responses, this very basic mind body response. And his whole idea is, well, how can we pharmacologically manage that? And he found that beta blockers like propranolol worked really well. Prazosin seemed to work really well for some kids. So I think having clarity about what's going on can be good. And PDA, not very many people in the US are talking about it yet. It's much more common over in the UK.
Oh,
And
okay. Interesting.
yeah, it's so validating because this little girl, we figured out this is very likely what's going on. And so we empowered her with tools that she wanted to use. And one of her favorite things to do is tapping. And so you might have heard of tapping, like emotional
Mm-hmm.
freedom technique. So for those who are
Yeah.
listening, I'm tapping on my head, and then you tap on your forehead, and then you tap on your temples, right? And
Yep.
she really likes that. And I'm like, you do you, whatever works. So she used to have these really huge meltdowns, big feelings. Her parents didn't want to do the pharmaceutical route. And so among the therapies that we tried, she really liked tapping. And there's this one day she was at gymnastics and there was a competition happening, so high pressure. So her adrenaline is already likely surging.
Yes.
And when normally she would have gone into a freeze or gone into like I have to get away, I need to run away, gone into a flee, her mom sent me a video of this little girl doing her tapping
Tapping.
on the edge of the floor mat, and she was able to work herself through accomplishing the goal that she'd set for herself. Like, I really want to do this floor routine, and I have a tool. But if mom had gone over to her and said, "Don't forget your tapping," she probably would have refused or been unable to do it.
It would have
So,
been that, again, that
yeah,
PDA thing of
yeah,
someone else. My God, it's such a strange,
yeah.
and maybe it is different for everyone, but what I'm hearing again, which is kind of that theme of your book, is that it's different. Even if it's the same symptom,
Mhm.
the root is gonna
Yeah,
possibly be different for everybody. So while that
exactly.
tapping worked for her.
Find a really good doctor who's an expert in that, because there's a Dr. Ralph has an assessment quiz that I've used, and so I can give this quiz to my parents and say, like, "Okay, do you notice any of these signs? These are more alpha activation signs, or do you notice more of these signs, or is it a combo of the two?" And then we may do a low dose trial of one at a time and see how the kiddo does. But I always want to say, put a semicolon at the end of that sentence, because again, the antidote to anxiety is that personal sense of power. And so if that little girl believes I'm broken and my only option is to try to take this medication, she's not getting that. She's not receiving that antidote, right? Her antidote was, I'm going to tap because I want to, and it's going to work. That's the antidote. So
Which is
do
so
that.
empowering.
Yes, it's the most amazing thing. So maybe do both depending on your unique circumstances, but always do the empowering strategy with the kid.
Yeah. So continuing on kind of this body piece, because I know you talk a lot about the gut brain chemistry, the endocrine system, which are our hormones.
Yes, yes.
Because I have a lot of hormone stuff going on, and make sure that's. I think I'm talking about that same thing. I know what that is.
Yes, yeah.
But I know that this can affect people of any age, of course, all of these different things. And I actually, when I was very young, way back when your dad was doing whatever he was doing. I was very young, and my mom had me on the Feingold diet, and this was before, hyperactivity was a big thing in the '70s. And Dr. Feingold he took out red dyes, so I went around to, like, birthday parties at 5, 6, and 7 saying, "I can't have additives and preservatives." So I wasn't allowed to have my mom would send me with special treats. She would make me special Easter candy, and she said it reduced my aggression, that I was able to be obviously less hyperactive, but I was also very aggressive as a kid. I know that there were other circumstances that were definitely affecting that, but I know also as an adult that I still do better when I don't put
Yeah.
chemicals in my body. So can that contribute to anxiety, or can at least removing and supplementing in the right ways support our ability to process those things at least?
This is my favorite question to be asked.
Oh,
And
it's one
so
of my favorites too. Yay.
yay! And what you're talking about are what are the obstacles to us being healthier, to being more vibrant, to being more resilient. We're looking at what's getting in the way of my body doing what it's wisely and beautifully designed to do. And really, red food dye is probably not good for any of us, but your body was really good at communicating that. And thank goodness your mom was a good listener at that communication and that she was able to identify maybe red food dye is an obstacle for Lori feeling better.
Yeah.
And so, obstacles to healing is what might be getting in the way of my teen, my kid, myself really thriving. I'm doing all of the things. I have my kids on all the supplements. I have them on all of we're gluten free, we're dye free, we're sugar free, we're fun free, right? We're doing all of the right things. And yet, my kiddo is still struggling with social anxiety or panic attacks or anger attacks, whatever it is. And oftentimes, when we feel like we're playing a game of whack a mole and we're just hitting that mole and it's coming up in a different hole every single time, and you're just so frustrated, is that could be caused by something that we haven't figured out yet that's getting in the way. And so, is that we want to look at the domains as is that in the body? Is it in the social attachment dynamics? Is it in having enough, decompression time, enough rest? Because oh my goodness, kids are so stressed these days in school, and
Yes.
what might be getting in the way of that? One thing that we see right now is the Anxious Generation book is talking about how our brains are so unable to reasonably process the amount of stimuli that are coming in. And we have
Mm.
these little brains, these little
And little
humans,
phones.
those little phones, and that big impact. And for many kids, I see that this is an obstacle to cure for them, that this is creating a disease state that the body is trying to adapt to, and then we're wondering why they're hyper, they can't focus, they're anxious, they get headaches, they have neck pain. We're wondering why all that's happening, and we're doing all the right things, but it could be that there's an obstacle through the phones.
Yeah. Or even what about excuse me, it sounds like maybe even overscheduling them, because when you said
Yeah.
rest, if
Yeah.
they're doing too many things, can that
Yeah.
then, like, even if they love going to karate,
Yeah.
if they're going 3 nights a week, or if they're going after really long days of school, and then they're angry in other situations, could we sometimes go, "Oh, maybe that, even though they love something, is too much for them." Like, we have to, if we're gonna
Yeah.
keep that, we have to cut out something else. Can
Ah,
we look at it like that too? Because it might not just show up
yes.
in connected to the source, right?
Oh, that's so wise, Lori. That's so good. And I'm thinking about, you know, when you have you ever been on a boat for a long time and you kind of get your sea legs, and then when you get off the boat, you feel like you're still rocking?
Yes.
It's the most annoying. You like go to bed at night and you're like going back and forth. So that's the metaphor for our kids, when they are put in high stress situations, whether it's fun stress or yucky stress, stress is stress. Your body doesn't care. It's the same, essentially the same chemical cascade that happens, but they start to adapt to that level of stress. So they may release a higher base level amount of cortisol. They may have to be more active. Their glucose utilization may be based on all of that busyness and stress and pressure. And then what we see in the research is that this can reduce the nervous system's flexibility and variability. And I remember when I was in medical school, we got on this program, it's called Heart Math. And
Oh, yes.
you've used that before, right? You put on your
Yes.
ear, your finger,
Finger. Mm-hmm.
and you want to see that your heart rate will speed up and slow down and speed up and slow down. And so that's the word variable. It's variable depending on when you're inhaling and exhaling, right? And so I was really frustrated because it was just like kind of, we called it Bart Simpson spikes, is there wasn't much variability in my heart. It was just really, really stressed. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do the breathing. I'm going to ace this like the Virgo that I am. Like I want to ace everything else. You can't ace your way into relaxed variability. And we see this with kids is that their bodies are in constant states of stress, right? So they're not getting that really good, delicious spike of excitation and then that wonderful drop and resting and feeling calm. And so we may have to architect their lives to really intentionally hold space for that. And that could be helping them get their sea legs back into being calm and then get their sea legs back into being acclimated. So what is something that we could remove from their schedule? Maybe they don't need all of those extracurriculars, or maybe they go to a Montessori school where the environment accommodates if your child has needs to be active and move around and be creative and use their hands versus sitting at a desk. And trying to figure out how we can create a life that will help not make them stressed all the time.
Yeah, not add to that stress
Yeah.
that we kind of just one size fits all our kids'
Mm,
lives as a
yeah.
society, maybe not even as parents, but really as a society. And we kind of corral them all into this one literal box of school a lot of the times. And not everybody is meant to deal with the kind of stressors of the environment and the busyness, the sensory overload. So interesting.
Yeah.
I know that we're almost at our time. Can I ask you, you mentioned, um, well, I'm going to summarize it as relational,
Yeah.
relational stress, creating anxiety.
Mm,
Even if it's just maybe our stress leaking out onto them, how is that something we can either recognize that this child is stressed by either myself or another member of the family or someone in their environment, that maybe it's not in their bodies, it's not like an overload, but it's actually a relationship that's creating this anxiety, even a peer relationship. Is there a way to maybe recognize, and then how do we deal with that? Because that maybe is different.
yeah. I'd be curious about when the kiddo is anxious and when we see that they're more stressed, their body's more activated. And so here's an example is dogs are way less complicated than people, and we have similar dynamics. And so I have a new puppy actually right now. She's downstairs probably chewing on my husband. And
Eating everything.
she's eating everything, God help us. So when she's with me, she's actually like pretty relaxed. She'll like lay on her bed and she'll like chew on her little toy and she just chills. And then when he's around, she's wild and barking and running around. And he's like, well, why is that happening? And so I point at him and I'm like, she's mirroring your energy. He's really excited and he's running around and he talks loudly and he gestures really big and he's so fun, but it's activating. And so
That's so funny.
she mirrors his energy. It's the same puppy.
Yes.
And I think our kids do that. We do that with our partners as we regulate. And so when you're noticing like, wow, whenever my kid is it's just me and them, they get more stressed versus if it's me and their other parent, or if they're at school, they're less stressed, is maybe start really working on your own level of activation and your
Mm.
own level of regulation and see if there's a way that you can start the process of co-regulating. And it's really interesting with equine work, equine horse, we
Oh,
do
yes.
horse assisted EMDR therapy and having
Wait,
the
horse
patient
assist did you just say horse
equine
assisted
assisted. Yes,
EMDR?
oh, it's so cool. I know, Lori, we gotta write that down. So there's
I
EMDR
do,
practitioners.
there's
It's so great. And they've done studies on this, that when you have a person receiving EMDR therapy and the horses are brought into that therapeutic relationship, horses are just such amazing mirrors of where we are in our states, is that they can actually start to co-regulate. And this is great for kids who are maybe a little frustrated and a little irritable, but they don't know that in themselves, but they know if Biscuit over here is like stomping his feet and if his ears are back. And then the process of, okay, well, how can I even unconsciously take a little bit of a breath, relax my shoulders, slow down my heart. And now Biscuit's like his eyes are more dewy and his tail's more relaxed. So co-regulating, knowing how our system is expressing and how that might be affecting our kid and vice versa. Your kid comes in dysregulated. How can you then regulate yourself so that they can then regulate? It's just beautiful, that relational
'cause
piece.
yeah, I was gonna say they're gonna feed on us. Like, even if they come in dysregulated, we can kinda just and that doesn't mean that we have to have, like, special training or have, like, all these like, even if we come in with a softened voice or a softer face, fewer questions, I think
Yeah.
all for me personally and my family, those are, I think, some ways that have helped us
Yeah.
ease that anxiety in our parent-child, in our family, in our parent-child relationship between we have 3, we just have 1 daughter, but definitely feeding on that energy, I see how that has come up, and I see it with the dogs too, we might be married to the same person. I so funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
My daughter and I actually make fun of, her dad because of that, because he'll be fine all day. He won't need walks or anything. He just lays like on his belly, and then as soon as my husband comes home, that puppy wants to go for a run. He's got to go for a walk 6 times. He's like, "Are we gonna play? Are we gonna eat? What are we gonna do?" And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's hilarious. And we have that's so funny. So I'm gonna tell him, be like, "Gotta check your energy because he is feeding off of that."
Yeah. And I love that it sounds like you guys kinda counterbalance each other a little bit, and because your energy is I'm sitting here, I'm feeling so relaxed just being with you, and I'm sure people listen to your podcast and they're all getting regulated listening to you.
Oh,
And
I love that.
yeah.
May in my work, probably, like, I was meant to do this, but I'm practicing in my home.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't know excuse me, I don't know if he would totally agree with that, but I definitely, because 'cause I'm actually much more like, "Ah," and
Yeah.
and he came from a house where you did not show emotions, and I came from, like, 2 ethnic backgrounds that they showed emotions really loudly, so we're kind of opposite in that way, and then but we're
Yeah.
learning now we're both learning the opposite, like, I'm learning practicing chill, and he's actually practicing,
Yeah.
being more emotive and really learning how to, like, process that, which is stuff that whether we have anxiety, whether we're dealing with panic attacks, whether
Yeah.
we have a traumatic childhood, or whether we just have some work stress, or life
Yeah.
stress, world
Yeah.
stress right now. All of the ways that I've heard you talk about mind, body, relational, and body. There's so many different ways. You've just talked about so many different ways that we can kind of access this healing. And I really appreciate that
Such a pleasure.
knowledge. I really do. I could learn forever on this topic because And you talk about it, I was going to say, and then I want to ask if you have any final comments, but I know in your book you talked about healing occurs in layers. So this is just another layer. I loved our talk last time. So if you're watching and you didn't watch it last time, please go watch it because it was wonderful. You get like the foundational elements of our body and recognizing those stress signals. And you do this in your book, which I love. It's not just like a book, let's read it. It's a workbook in itself. You don't need like a companion workbook because it's all inside the reflection questions and really getting to know my personal body is what the book took me through, was questions that pertain to my stress and anxiety, and not necessarily just sort of general, oh, you're not going to tell everybody to breathe. Like you said, you're going to take them on this path, asking questions so that they can identify what layer they're at and where they're going.
I love that. And I was just thinking that the last thought is, I love that you as a helper have read this book and done your own work. And so you're part of the community-based solution to this problem of anxiety is the problem, right? And so for those who are listening is maybe get this book for your doctor or your therapist and be like, can we go through this together? Because you as a clinician could probably help me get even more out of these pages, and we could do it together. So even if they're not the expert, together you guys could do, I think, really exciting stuff. And then maybe they learn something and do it with their other patients.
That's fabulous. I love it.
Yeah.
Take it in and along with your practitioner. Even with, I could see just getting a friend, a buddy to do it with as a start. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm not seeing anybody, or I don't have medical insurance, or I can't go. Grab a friend and do it with each other, because sometimes just those two minds working together can help support that healing in place. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that.
Well, I love that you have come to help me be part of that community healing, and that your book is out there spreading that word. So everyone can find you at drnicolecain.com.
Yes. That's my website. That's my Instagram.
And I was going to say, of course, on Instagram, on all the socials, I'm sure we can find you. Dr. Nicole, thank you so much for coming back, for sharing your wisdom. And I wish you so much success with this book. I hope everybody goes out and gets it.
Thank you, Lori. I loved hanging out with you again. It's like coming home to an old friend. So thank you.
Yay. I love chats by the fireside there's no fireside, but you know what I mean.
I have my cup of tea here too. So we're having tea. We're sitting by our beautiful whatever sides, and we're having tea and talking about the real stuff. So thanks everyone for listening.
Yes, thank you. All right, everybody, that's another episode. Thank you so much for watching. And if you like this video, go ahead and click like and subscribe. And I will see you all again soon. Remember, conscious, not perfect.